I am Andrew Marconi, and I am joined by Maddox Davies today as we're going to talk about the story We Remember It by Brandon Mitchell. This story talks about the Listigou fish raids of 1980 and 1981. What happened was Quebec provincial police and game wardens raided the First Nations community of Listigou over their quote unquote illegal fishing practices. This includes fishing with a net and fishing at night. At the end of each raid, fish and game wardens would seize all the fish that the community caught over their traditional fishing season, and Quebec police would arrest anyone who protested. In the end, though, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the community is allowed to fish when they want and where they want, as well as they're allowed to sell their fish. After the story, though, the author would go on a podcast himself and explain the background of why he made this story. He explains that he was a young boy living in the community of Listigou and he was present during the raids. He mentions how whenever someone asks him where he's from, he talks about where he's from, which is Listigou. Immediately, people talk about where they were when the raids happened, giving supplies to the community. During the story part of the podcast, though, we can hear a couple of sound effects that I would like to mention. One sound effect that stood out to us was the sound of police sirens in the background. This helps add to the intense mood of the story, as well as symbolizing government oppression towards Indigenous people and their culture. Another sound effect that we like to mention is the sound of people protesting. This represents the continued fight for justice for all Indigenous rights and hope for a new change in Canada.
Through the eyes of the Indigenous characters, the authors show the innocence of the Indigenous people and that they were only doing what was needed to survive, which is represented through fishing. In this scenario, Gwis and his father are in a boat fishing. However, they are not seen with big nets and catching as many fish as they can. No, they have fishing poles and they're catching whatever is actually necessary for their family. Unlike the officers who complained about their fishing, these officers believe that these families are overfishing, but really, Gwis and his father are only catching what is really necessary. This story perfectly portrays resistance, which is shown through the father refusing to give up fishing, which is a valid response considering they weren't the ones overfishing, unlike the police officers. Through listening to the podcast, I was able to learn that the author lived near where the raids took place, meaning that this story was likely inspired by witnessed events or stories. Overall, I found it more enjoyable to read the book than listening to a podcast. Through pictures, I was able to understand what was happening a lot easier than if I were to listen. I understood the emotion, the setting, the characters, and any other thing that displayed context, simply through connecting text to image. The only question I have about the story is, what if the entire world lived like this today? Would we have more resources? Would coexisting be easier? I feel like if everyone took what they needed, saving on resources would obviously be a lot less of an issue. And because of the lessons that are displayed, I would definitely recommend this story to others, as it talks about what the world has tried to take away from Indigenous people.
Overall, I really love the story, as I've always loved stories that have police in them, no matter if they're the protagonist or the antagonist of a story. I feel that police always add a good sense of action to the story and helped me understand the story a lot more. This story also helped me understand the struggles of Indigenous people a lot more, as well as show me how there's different stories all across Canada like this about Indigenous people. I feel the podcast also really helped me create an image in my head when reading the story, and it also helped me feel really immersed with the story at hand because of it. I feel that I have completely understood this story to its full degree, and my question is, though, why did the Canadian government break its treaties with Indigenous people? And though there is a path to reconciliation, is there a way for Indigenous people to forgive the government for what it's done, as the damage that has been done to Indigenous people is really significant, with many Indigenous people having irreversible intergenerational trauma? Overall, though, I really love the story and I would recommend it to my friends.